This is Juneau, Alaska, my home since 1950. This is Star Hill, where I live. I live at the top of the Star Hill stairs, all 186 of them. Here I come. None the worse for wear. I don't live on a street, but I live on this little trail, which is very quiet and very nice. Here we are at my house. Come on in and welcome. When I finish a painting, instead of sending it straight off to the gallery to be framed, I like to look at it for a while, study it and see what I could have done differently. Here is one that I recently finished. It's a painting of a boat on the grid. It's a Teneke boat called the Omega 2. And I was down there, went down to the boat harbor to see if there was anything interesting to sketch, and indeed there was. These people are scrubbing the hull of their boat and for getting it ready for the spring season. This man, up until recently, ran his boat as a charter boat. And he took people out salmon fishing on the Omega 2, but now he's retired. The dog is in there just for good measure. He wasn't really there. Sometimes when older people, older men I should say, no longer go out whaling, they still do a very great service to the village because they've then become whale watchers. And this man has his little grandchild with him, and he's out there looking for whales. And in a way it serves a double purpose because he's also a babysitter at the same time. This is the Teneke Boat Building Company. They organized in Teneke to build boats, and they built one boat, and then they lost interest and realized that they were all musicians, so they started playing together. And the name of their orchestra is the Teneke Boat Building Company. A mother and her daughter walking on the beach at Gamble on St. Lawrence Island. The racks hold umiaks over their heads, and they're walrus skin boats. Well, these people in Juneau are gathering herring eggs, and they do that by putting spruce branches in the water. They tie them to a rope, and they put them in at low tide, tie them to a rope, and then anchor it up on the beach by a rock. And the tide comes in, and the herring lay their eggs on these branches. And so when the tide goes out again, they go back down and pick up the branches. And you see here, these branches are very heavily laden with herring eggs. They eat them either raw or cooked. And I've tasted them, and they're quite good. This is a Teneke cabin. Teneke has one long street that's unpaved, about 10 feet wide, no cars. And on the waterfront side, all the houses are built on piling, and the high tide comes in under these houses. These are people up north. They're dividing muktuk, which is the skin and the inner layer of the whale. Somebody's been out whaling, they caught a whale, and the whale is always shared by everyone in the whole village. So this woman is taking her pick, and the others are waiting to take their pick. Muktuk tastes a little bit like hazelnuts, only it's definitely greasier. I was sketching on St. Lawrence Island in the Bering Sea about the time the prisoners of war were being released. I saw this umiak, which is a walrus skin boat, with welcome POWs written on it, so I did this painting of it. This is kind of a traditional scene of what goes on in some of the remote villages and also sometimes in town. And that is when Christmas is over, people take the decorations off and just heave the Christmas tree out the front door. And of course what eventually happens is all the needles fall off, and then later on at some point a big wind comes along and the tree disappears. And I know that this happens in towns also, because that's exactly the way my neighbor gets rid of his Christmas tree after the season. These people are on St. Lawrence Island, and they've heard that there's a whale out in the water beyond, and so they're quickly getting out their umiaks, their walrus skin boat, and are racing out there to see if they can get that whale. The man in the foreground has two red floats, and the sealskin on the left is also a float made by Eskimos. This man is standing on a little platform on his roof. This is in St. Lawrence Island, and what he's doing up there, he's looking for whales. These people are great whalers. The house, if you can tell, the house is a six-sided house instead of a four-sided house. The prow part faces the prevailing wind, which is out at the ocean. This is a cemetery at Kotzebue, and I decided somebody told me where it was, and I decided to go over and look. And it really surprised me because from a distance it was very bright, a lot of bright colors in it. And of course there are all these fake flowers that people use nowadays. It was midwinter, and yet these flowers were doing great, fading somehow, but there they are. This gives you a good idea of how most of the villages on the Bering Sea coast are located. They're right near the water, but on the area in front of the water is where they keep their umiaks, and then right directly behind that is the village, with most of the houses facing the water. Another cemetery. This is kind of interesting because I couldn't figure out what was going on. Those people standing there. In the winter, it's way too cold, and the earth is totally frozen to bury people. And so I think this is just a memorial service. Needless to say, I didn't go down there to check with those people. On King Island, where I taught school, the island is just all rock. There is no area at all where you can stick a shovel in the ground and not hit solid rock. So there the people are buried in homemade caskets on top of the soil, and they put lots of huge rocks on top of those graves. This is the town of Unalakleet, and this boat is actually frozen in the ice. This is in Unalakleet, where I went one time, stayed for about a week to sketch, and somebody had lent me her apartment, and she said, be sure to feed the snow buntings if they should arrive. And the snow buntings are the first birds in the spring to arrive. I taught school on King Island, and there when the women went out fishing, they're catching all sorts of fish, Irish lords and codfish usually. And they were very easy to catch. So they go out fishing, and they would make this circle of fish, and as soon as the circle was completed, then they would go home. However, if they wanted to stay longer, they would just push the fish out a little bit, thereby making a big circle so that they could get more in. A favorite thing up north for children when the northern lights come out is to either whistle at the northern lights because they want them to dance. However, in another village it might be they whistle to the northern lights to make them disappear. And there are all sorts of different reasons why they whistle to the northern lights. And here's one of the scenes. And once more, whistling at the northern lights, and there's a dog helping them. He's howling at the northern lights. This is a dog team that I saw when I went up to Unalakleet to see the Iditarod racers come through. And this is one of the teams, and they all spend the night there at Unalakleet. And usually the racers stay in somebody's house, and they're treated royally and given a good bed to sleep on and lots of food. And the dogs are outside. They are lying on straw or hay that the racer takes with him to give the dog something a little warmer to lie on than snow. This is a place called the Nook, and it's very close to Nome. And I think it's kind of a summer camp for some of the Nome people. Anyhow, it's great fishing there, and this woman is drying her fish. It's a subsistence fishery, of course. Most of these fish that are hung out just to dry are fed to their dog teams. For their own, I think they also use some dried fish, but a lot of smoked fish. This is back at the Nook again, just somebody hanging up her laundry. There's always a good ocean breeze there, so laundry dries in nothing flat. This woman is bringing home a whole bunch of dried fish. It's been hanging out there to dry. It is now totally dry. And when a fish is totally dry, it's kind of a ugly brownish color, but I prefer to make it a nice red color. These people are at a place called Sigig, where they also do a heck of a lot of subsistence fishing, again for dog teams, for the most part, but also for themselves. These fish have just been caught and filleted, and now they're washing them in the ocean and then salting them down, putting them in that big tub and salting them down. If you don't have a little fire near these fish that are drying, especially when they're still barely just caught, very fresh, flies are inclined to fly onto the fish and lay their eggs in it. So you have to keep the flies away if you can. One perfect way to do it is, of course, to have a strong wind, which just about always prevails. But if that's not the case, just a fire that smokes a lot, throwing wet moss on it or wet grass will definitely keep the flies away. And this is a small cache. Cache is used to store stuff in, usually perishables, or at least food so that the dogs can't get into it. This is Savunga, also the only other town on St. Lawrence Island besides Gamble. And here, in the summer, these people are standing on the roofs. You see the ladders that go up there? They're permanent ladders. They're standing on the roof to look for seals, because they're hunting seals at this time of year. I went with the people from Buckland. They all took their tents, they took their dogs, they took camp stoves, and they lived at this particular place during the beluga whaling season. Sigig, the whaling camp, had one difficult situation, and that was there was no fresh water there. So the minute all the town arrived at Sigig, men went out in their skiffs looking for icebergs, and then when they find one, they drag it back to town. And they put an axe in it, and then anyone who wants fresh water goes down with a bucket, chops off some ice, and takes it home. And what really surprised me, I was there for about a week, and with an incredible water situation, here some people were washing their hair. And there were about 4 different people who were there at the time, and they all washed their hair in the same rather small bucket of water. And then they finally, when everyone had washed their hair, they threw the water out and put in some fresh water, and then they all rinsed their hair in that fresh water. Interesting thing about this painting is also, see those boots hanging on the center pole of the tent? That's how they dry their boots if they've gotten water in them. Oil drums is something you find all over, and the reason you do is oil is shipped in, but they never take the old barrels back again. So they are used for everything and anything imaginable. They are made into dog houses. They're burnt out and made and cleaned and made into water barrels.